Welcome to Forensic Friday,
where we examine the intersection of true crime, psychology, and the heart of being human in the middle of it all. I feel like we should acknowledge that we crossed the 1,000 download mark, which is just amazing. Natalie's dancing. You can't see her, but it's glorious. Thank you guys so much. We are just pumped. Really, we're just starting to kind of get in the groove of doing this whole thing. So thanks for the feedback, the comments, maybe not all of the comments, but like if you don't like what we're doing, just move along. Nothing to see here. That's fine.
Yeah.
Keep it moving.
Hey man, at the end of the day, you're the one sitting here wasting your time trolling people's pages, and that sucks, and that's sad.
Yeah. Well, how much time do you spend, Natalie, listening to things that you hate?
0.
Yeah, me too. So of course you're going to be annoyed.
And I don't comment on something I hate. I just pass it.
No, same. It's just ridiculous. So anyway, people have been so kind and excited about our podcast. It just is what it is, and it comes with the territory. And I'm not all worried about it. Mostly people have been really great.
I remember when we sent our first one out, and my best friend, I was like, all right, I'm ready. And she, I told her, I was like, you got to be kind. And she's like, I love it. And I was like, oh, but thank God.
Thank goodness. So tonight we're going to work on breaking down megachurches a little bit.
Oh my gosh, I feel like we are taking on a bomb.
Brick by brick.
Literally.
We just have to talk about this. So I want to give a little background, and Nat, you can chime in too. Mm-hmm. Natalie and I have had a lot of experience in Christian evangelical subculture land. So we've worked on church staffs before. We've gone to church, not gone to church. We've done a lot of these things. Yeah. And so when we're talking about this today, I just want to lay that out there, that this is not about what people believe or not. We're not getting into a debate about that. This is not about politics. This is not any of that. No. I always joke with Nat, my political party is disgruntled and disappointed. Like if you put that on a ballot, I'll vote for it every time. So
I think that's most of the US.
Honestly, I think that's most of us. We're not trying to get into that.
No. And I just laugh. I told you this earlier. I keep seeing like things on, social medias of like, we just need to like heal, and which speaks to our little therapy brain. So anyway.
Also, like, is this the best we have? Which I really, that just seems wild to me. I mean, I can think just off the top of my head, 45 people would be better. I don't even have to think.
I hear you.
But anyway, we're not going to get into all of that because that is not helpful. We really want to talk about the psychology of these church environments that ultimately tend to implode. And it's one of the reasons why church attendance is so low, like historic low.
Yes.
And we really want to talk about that. So this isn't about dogging on Christians or
churches
like or saying everybody should be a Christian and go to church. It's not about any of those things. This is really about looking at some of the dysfunction and what drives that dysfunction, and then what we can do about it.
And I would like to say, before I became a therapist, that's all I did. I worked in ministry. I worked for different ministries at different points in my life. And I will be the first to say they were really awesome ones that I worked with and for. Yeah. I love the church I go to. Yeah. So the goal of this isn't to dog on every single church. It's to identify the problems that have come up in the last 10, 15 years. But I wanted to make it known that, before me doing this career, all I did was ministry. And there were points where I was in love with it, and I loved working on different staffs. And then there was times where it was horrible. And I think it's just important to talk about that.
Absolutely. And I'm a disgruntled pelican about church at this point. Now, my belief system is what it is, and it's very important to me. Yeah. But I consider myself relatively independent and unaffiliated at the moment with a specific church because your girl's been burned 5 times by this pattern we're going to talk about today.
Yes. Well, and I told you this earlier. I won't work for a church again.
No, I know, I get it.
I mean, I can't say I'll never, because I'd never say never.
Yeah, totally.
But where I'm at right now, where I have been in the last, since 2016,
Yeah.
I haven't been firmly planted in. I obviously love the career I'm in now, so that's a whole thing. But
You can't leave because you're great at it. And
and I love it. And you and I will work together forever.
we will. We've already decided. Yeah, we hug now.
Yes. But since 2016, I can confidently say that I have not been drawn to be a part of a church staff. I'm thankful that my husband and I found a church that we love and that we trust. And we've gotten to know the head pastor. We know their family, and
absolutely
that's has spoken volumes for us. But
that can be healing too, for sure.
Yeah, but since 2016, I have not sat there and said, man, I want to jump back into church staff, which sucks.
And even though I'm a disgruntled pelican, I will say, when my husband and I were deep into COVID, everybody was so isolated. I had an immunocompromised family member, so I'm working from home. The place that we found some really cool people was the church. Now, all of us have since left that church. So we still love each other. I love these people so much. We survived COVID together. We would hang out every Friday night on Zoom after we put the kids to bed. Like, these are really special, amazing people. But we have all left for similar reasons. And it's because of, again, the formula we're going to go over today. So how about we get into it?
Let's do it.
Okay. So we're going to frame this. I want to be really clear that Natalie and I are not going to be talking about specifics from any of the churches we've worked at or served. Correct. Because that doesn't help anybody, and we actually have potential to really hurt people. Yeah. What y'all need to know is we have seen some things. So we are speaking with a fair bit of authority about what some of these dynamics look like when you are boots on the ground. Yes. But we're actually going to we're going to throw Hillsong under the bus and back over it. Hillsong and Mars Hill are going to be two of the examples that we talk about. We've never worked for them. Again, some of this is speculation, things we've found in research, also just entirely unsurprising given what we know.
Right. And we're not the first ones to do a deep dive into either one of those churches.
No, because you know what? When you build a big church, lots of people talk about it. That's the thing. That's the thing about it.
Yep.
So if we back up and we kind of lay out Hillsong for just a second, Brian Houston took over for his dad. He was a gnarly dude. Brian Houston's father abused children and was bad.
Bad.
Just bad. So Brian Houston kind of inherited the church, and really immediately they are building this platform on secrets. Frank's stuff is kept hidden, kept a secret. Brian takes over in the 90s and the 2000s, which this is when we were really seeing prosperity gospel, purity culture. Yes. These things are taken off.
Yes.
And Brian Houston is no dummy. He's going,
right. Oh.
And what happened around this time is there were churches springing up. And this one in particular was in Sydney, Australia. And really, I mean, this kind of went almost all the way up until almost 2005-ish. The band was huge. So Hillsong, the church was named something else. It doesn't matter. The church music, the worship was so popular. And I can still think of all these songs. So it's like the music of my childhood going to church. It's like all the old classics, right? Yes. And my mom sang at church. So my mom sang an awful lot of these songs. I have some pretty sweet memories of some of that. It got so big that they ended up selling 16 million albums, and they start raking in 100 million a year. Right. It's like, we got to change the name of the church.
Yep.
So they changed it to Hillsong, which really was the name of the band, of the music arm of all of this. The music is really the thing. And the girl, and you'll know her if you grew up in any kind of church culture, the red-haired Australian lady who sings. Name's Darlene, can't say her last name, Zench, I don't know, something like that. But she had this really big voice, and they were making super contemporary music and people just went nuts over it, right?
Yep.
Okay, so Brian decides we are Hillsong. We are Hillsong. They just fall in line, right? So 2010, they decide to bring it to the US. Carl Lentz brings it to the US. All of a sudden, it is in New York in a theater, and it is huge. Like massive Justin Bieber, Selena Gomez. Oh gosh, who else went?
Yep.
All these.
All of the Kardashians.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Like rap stars.
Oh yeah, it was huge.
Everyone.
They had a VIP section at this church in the theater.
Which, can I just say really quick?
Oh, please do.
The fact that you have a VIP section
Yep.
in a church.
Yep.
I mean, I'm like, when I first heard that, I was like, I don't think I agree with that.
I don't agree with any of this. I know. And the other thing that is amazing, and I forget the name of the website, but the guy said pastor sneakers or pastors and sneakers, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
And they were exposing just the
everything, all the money
that was getting thrown around.
Yes.
Like we're wearing Louis Vuitton belts and we're wearing, $800 sneakers and we're stuff. And you guys have to know, for those of you who didn't grow up in church or you don't know how church works, churches are typically nonprofit organizations, so they don't pay taxes in the same way that other corporations do. And it's a lot of that operating fund money is coming from the people at the church. Because in the Bible, what a lot of people believe is that you're supposed to give 10% of your money to the church every month, which that's a whole theological thing we're not going to get into today. But because of that, there's a lot of money coming directly from the pockets of your congregants that is then being used to pay the staff and to pay for the staff's expenses.
Yes.
And the Hillsong crew were wild.
I was just looking at the part where Justin literally calls out Carl on his sweatshirt that he's wearing, but I can't find it. But he's like, "You're living the good life," and names the brand that he's wearing. And I actually feel like in that moment, Carl Lentz was so uncomfortable.
Yeah, he should be. I hope he was feeling a little warm.
I think he was.
Because it's nuts. This is nuts. Absolutely crazy. So
yes. Yep. Continue.
The staff had credit cards. They're blowing money all over the place. Travel, getting outfitted and all their stuff, all their production stuff. It's just wild. And I have to say, when I was watching this, I just kept getting like punched in the face with things from my childhood.
Yes.
That I remember that I'd been exposed to. Prosperity gospel is basically kind of this notion that if things are going well, it's because you're good. Like what you're doing is pleasing the Lord and you're doing the right things and he is blessing that. And that's why you have money coming in or you have good things happening or whatever.
Yes. Yep.
Again, we're not going to get into the theology of that. I have major issues with that theology. However, it is something a lot of people believe, and that's an important foundation of the formula that Nat and I think we cracked. We cracked the Da Vinci Code. I think we know how this happens. Yeah, we're at least close. I think we're close.
I think we're close.
Yep. The other piece of this that really plays in, I think, is purity culture. So purity culture is another really intense piece of the megachurch / church of the 90s, 2000s puzzle, is this idea that you don't have sex before marriage and you remain pure, whatever that means. And there were all these books that came out. I Kissed Dating Goodbye, like all this stuff. People were making true love weights, pledges, like it was all the rage. And then there'd be like one tiny chapter at the end for like sexual abuse, or if you've already screwed up, you can get back on the horse by reading this last chapter.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes. I mean, here's the thing. I never like went through that because I didn't grow up in the same type of environment. I think I didn't grow up with having to sign a purity culture contract.
I did not sign, for the record.
Love that.
But yeah.
However, I think, yeah, I mean, we're not going to get into theology and all that stuff. However, there's just a lot there. There's just a lot there.
But again, good. We have to be good.
Yes.
And who needs to be good? Particularly women.
Yes.
And it goes into the modesty stuff. There's just a lot. There's a lot to unpack there. For people who are trying to not have sex, they are hyper focused on sex.
Yes. And the shame that it creates. I think that's the biggest detriment to how it's gone about and how it's taught is it's shame-based rather than information and learning.
Absolutely. And it's okay to have core values around this stuff, like talking to your children, talking about boundaries, all that stuff. That can be very healthy, wonderful, good stuff. But as a movement, Nat and I are really talking about the big movement of prosperity gospel, the big movement of purity culture. They left a mark. And I think we're seeing this like wash, rinse, repeat kind of cycle happening with our churches. And it is really disenfranchising a lot of people who don't want to go to church anymore because they've seen this show before over and over.
Yes. Well, and I'm sure we'll get into this here in a little bit. Again, going to the shame piece, I think that's the core of what we're going to see and why everything deconstructs and falls apart.
I think so too. I think you're totally right.
So we'll get there, but that's my hypothesis of this whole thing.
I think that's going to line up really well. So the formula that I literally just drew and ran by Natalie like 10 minutes ago. So bear with me. It's a flow chart written in pink marker. So
you did great.
I did not like do an academic study. Okay. This is me spitballing about what I have observed. So it's very much okay if you disagree with this, but I'm going to kind of lay it out. So number one to this formula, like this is like the prerequisite to the formula I'm about to tell you about, is when a church starts to function like a corporation.
Perfect. Let's go.
Yep. So when a church starts to function like a corporation, here's the formula to demise, okay, that I think you could stencil over just about anything. Number one, we have a growing church. There may or may not be a really charismatic pastor at this point, but you have a church that's having pretty explosive growth. Typically, there's something driving that growth. Worship, a pastor, something's driving it, right? Well, the more people you have, the more successful you appear. More people want to check it out because there's more cars in the parking lot. So something must be going well here, right? Then we're giving more money. If everybody in the church is giving 10% of their salary, the church starts to bring in enough money to pay their bills, pay their staff, whatever, right? And that grows as the people grow.
Yes.
So then what happens when we have more money now? We have more power. And so when we have more power, first of all, we get very attached to power.
Yes.
And we don't want to lose it. So now we have more to lose. So if we're an imperfect person and we don't want to lose any power or money, we start to have secrets.
Yep.
And when we have secrets, we know, like biblically, we know, they get brought out into the light, and then we have a massive fall from grace, typically.
Yes.
Right? Then, unfortunately, and again, this is just my experience, we learn nothing. Pastor, worship pastor, Sunday school teacher, whoever the catastrophic failure was, they are called, my fingers are making quotes,
air quotes,
somewhere else. And we just repeat it somewhere else. That's like literally how this goes.
Yes. We've seen it happen over and over and over again with these mega church people.
I've seen it 5 times. Twice, 2 of the 5 were at the same church.
I did not count, but yes, I believe that.
It's a lot. And we're tired. We're a little crispy, right? Like churchgoers, you see somebody take the mic and it feels a little different that day. And you're like, oh, here we go. I know. I already know what they're going to say. It's one of 2 or 3 things, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the things that's been grounding for me, and then I want to ask you about this, Nat. One of the things that's been grounding for me is one of my closest family friends just retired from ministry after 39 years. Okay, I'm 40. He's been in ministry my entire life. He's been in my life my entire life. I've grown up around him, and he has served the same little church of, I don't even know how many, you guys, but it's so tiny. It is the sweetest little church in Illinois, and he just has married, buried, all the things with this community of people for all of these years. And he's not a rich man in any of the ways that our society says you should be rich. But his experiences with these people, he is my grounding and really kind of a little bit of a saving grace sometimes when I think about the church, because I have actually seen somebody stick it out in a really beautiful way. However, this formula never happened because the church never got massive, the money never got massive, the power never got massive. And he stayed really rooted and grounded in what he knew and what he didn't know. He was constantly studying and learning, and I'm so grateful for him. When you hear this formula, Nat, what do you think? First of all, do you agree? Would you add anything, change anything? What do you think when you look at it?
Your formula to the megachurch?
Yeah, how these things fail.
Oh, I agree with it. I want to speak to really quickly the last part you said, and then I'm going to go back to the formula. So when you were sharing about the friend of yours that just retired, I have a really good friend whose dad was a pastor in a really small town in Washington. And same thing, very, very humble, loved and loves his community. Just really did it for all the right reasons, for his core, based out of his core values, his own belief system, all of that. And so I think that just speaks to, there are good churches, there are good
absolutely
people who love Jesus, who are in it for the right reasons, And
even the people who fall, who have these tremendous falls, there's grace for them too. And also,
absolutely,
a lot of those churches started this way and then just got off track.
Yes, I agree with that. I was just going to say, I actually think a lot of, not all, I think a good amount of pastors start with the best intention.
Oh, I think so too. Most people don't go in to become a pastor to be famous.
Right.
They sort of back into this kind of status.
Yes.
And then it's like a sickness. And I have seen it. If I look at a picture of a pastor in the beginning and a pastor at the end, they always look different. They literally look different. It's unbelievable.
They're super buff at the end.
Well, that is one piece that I have seen, which tracks with.
Yes. And here's the thing, me, I am all about mind, body, spirit. Like, 100%. All things have to be healthy in order for us to be the healthiest versions of ourselves. So I'm all for churches getting on bandwagons to like get healthier. And sometimes that can get to our heads a little bit.
If you are wearing a children's t-shirt
and you're busting out of it, get a big
thing is wrong. So just like throw a jersey on. I don't care. But we don't need tiny t-shirt time as a problem.
No, it's good to take care of yourself. I'm all for building muscle. I'm all for, anywho.
At least wear an adult size t-shirt. That'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Public service announcement.
We might get crap for that one.
Oh, well, we're going to get crap for a lot of this one. I'm okay with it.
Yes. Here's the thing. I look at your formula and I do agree with it. I think it gets really sideways really quickly. And, the prosperity gospel, here's the thing. I'm going to throw one other corporation under the bus. Joel Osteen.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry. I'm throwing him under.
Back him over.
Just can't.
Oh, my God. I saw his church in Houston from a distance and got the willies. Like, I was like, this is so wrong. All of it is, I can't with him. And he's the epitome of prosperity gospel. Epitome.
Oh, the epitome. I wonder if he charges at the door to go to service.
I feel like this is generally the formula that we see, give or take a few steps.
Yes.
Would you say?
Yes.
So, one of the things now that I wanted you to kind of weigh in a little bit on is what happens to the staff culture at a church while this thing is going through this process. Because what we see the people who are on stage, we see worship pastors, we see folks like Carl Lentz who come in and they're super embraced by a church and taken in. And by the end, Carl Lentz was showing up in a limo, getting out, giving his sermon, who knows, signing autographs in the VIP section. I don't actually know if that's true, but it feels right. And then he leaves, gets in his limo and goes home. Right? He doesn't hang out. He doesn't talk to anybody. Whatever.
Yes.
That's like the worst case scenario where a pastor's super removed. But for the staff, the behind the scenes and the volunteers and all of that, what are some things you've noticed in these cultures?
I'm going to be super mindful of how I say this. I think what I have seen is it starts off actually really fun. And it's like this family dynamic.
Exciting.
Everyone feels like the whole staff, including the head pastor, whoever, is all in it for the good reason. And again, I do think there's probably a part of them that is, if not most of them, but at least a part of them.
I agree.
And
they're
so
probably excited too, to be honest. Like,
yes,
everybody's excited. Like, we're growing this thing. It's going well. There's more people showing up. It's exciting to be a part of something like that.
Yes. And here's the thing, at the end of the day, and we see this in the mental health world, it's not necessarily, churches say this, but I'll say this for the mental health world. It's not about the money. However, yeah, when I have more clients, or you have more clients, or our colleagues have more clients, I'm like, thank the Lord, more people are wanting to get healthier. Yeah. Our goal is to work ourselves out of jobs, right? Like, I don't want to keep people forever.
No.
However, it's, so I think sometimes churches start with that mindset of we are getting more people in the door, meaning we are helping more people are getting community, more people are maybe getting the help that they need. And so I think the mindset starts that way, and it starts in this family mindset. And I'm going to just go ahead and jump the gun here. If you sign on to any job and they say, we are like a family, you run the other way.
Run like you're on fire.
Yes. If it's like, we are a great family, I just view all my coworkers as family, get out. Just say, thank you for this interview. And I will see myself out of the door.
100%.
Fun stay. So I think that's how it starts.
Yes.
Over time, I think, and here's my thought. So I'm going to interject in your formula.
Yeah, please do.
I think what gets in the way of how churches start that way, or pastors or people on staff, I think what gets in the way is, I'm going to say it in two different ways: lack of self-accountability and maybe self-awareness.
Yes.
From the top.
Yes.
And humility, lack of all those things. And then also fear of being raked over the fire. I think that's the phrase. I always get phrases wrong.
That's a Natalieism.
Okay. Yes. That's a Natalieism. My husband has a whole book of Natalieisms. So I'm going to say raked over the fire, because that's my phrase. Raked over the fire, raked over the coals. I think people at the top, pastors, are also fearful of getting raked over the coals.
Yes.
If they share some of their struggles, past struggles. So there's this there's no room for it sometimes. And then also, I'm not going to share these things because that shows that maybe I have weaknesses as a human.
Absolutely. And, we were joking earlier about people making comments. I think pastors take a lot of hits. I can have a lot of empathy. You can't please everybody. You're going to hear it on both sides.
Yes.
And your livelihood's dependent on it. And in a Christian culture, you're supposed to live in peace and harmony with all these people who are all disagreeing with you and everybody else. And so what I notice is a distancing Pastors
Yes.
start putting layers and layers of distance between themselves and the congregants.
And staff.
Oh, and staff. So it's assistants, it's office hours, it's whatever it is. And they're pretty soon they're around us. Like Carl Lentz, you show up in your limo, you talk for 20 minutes and you leave. I mean, it really does sort of become a show.
Yep.
And I think my compassionate view of the psychology of that is they've taken so many hits that they just don't want to take them anymore. They want to turn it off. They want to block it. They want to, all the things we can do with social media, they can't do in real life with people who are showing up every week.
Yes.
So they build barriers.
So, and then the problem with these barriers is I'm isolating.
Yes.
So as we have mentioned many times, we actually said this earlier today, when I isolate and maybe the things that I struggle with stay in the dark and there's not light shed on them, they grow and they fester and they get worse.
Absolutely.
And so when you're a pastor and we're not leaning into accountability, surrounding ourselves with people who can hold us accountable, there's no light getting shed on these things and they just get worse and they grow and it impacts everybody beneath.
Yes. Well, and it's so interesting, Nat, that you say the accountability piece, because that's so important to both of us in our work with clients. It's like ground zero. Like, you will be accountable. I will be accountable, right? Like that's basic in our work. It's interesting when I think about the purity culture piece, because I honestly think, and I know some of you are going to hate hearing this. It's okay. You don't have to agree with me. That's fine. But I think some of this gap in accountability comes with this purity culture, sexual immorality, whatever this stuff, whatever the lingo is at these churches, that's typically the secret. That's where the secrets tend to live.
Yes.
Because that behavior is where a lot of secrets fester. It's a connection. It's secretive. It's exciting. We certainly can't talk about it. It's easier to talk about drugs and alcohol in the church than it is, I had an affair, or I'm gay, or I watched pornography, or whatever. Like those things are so hard to talk about at church.
Well, and I know this showed up with Hillsong and with Mars Hill in different ways. So the things that potentially they have struggled with, they actually assert more dominance and control of their staff to manage.
Which we have a psychological term for that. It's projection.
Yes.
So if I'm struggling with something, if I'm, the churchy words are hard, but lust. Okay, if I look at a woman and I picture her naked and I want to have sex with her, okay,
Right.
Which is lust. There you go. That's the PG-13 version of lust. Thank you. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. When that happens, if I see things that way, then I'm going to try to coach everyone around me to avoid that thing. I'm going to assume they think like me, and I'm going to instruct them as if they think like me. That is Carl Lentz in a nutshell.
Yes, that's exactly what he did. He was struggling inside with all of his own stuff. And here's the thing to all of our listeners, there are a few interviews with him where he is very honest about his affair. So,
oh, absolutely. Yes.
I'm not naming something that isn't already out there.
Oh, no, he owned it. He's owned it.
He owned it, which I respect.
I do too.
So his whole thing, right, was he was telling, I mean, there was times where he would hone in on other staff members who had sex before marriage and said, you can't be on staff or you can't be singing on stage because of what you did. And behind the scenes, he's having this full-blown affair.
Oh, yeah. And if you go meta with it now, like the pressure to marry young so that you don't violate this thing.
Yes.
If you do sleep together, then you should probably marry that person, right?
And that happens all the time.
Pressure's ridiculous. It's ridiculous on these young couples in particular.
Yes.
It's just wild. Yeah. What a great way to start a marriage. We can have sex now. Yay. Oh, I don't know that I like you.
I just really want to sleep with you.
We should have given that a minute. We will have we're going to have to do a whole episode on purity culture because that's just that's its own whole thing that we got to talk about. And I'm also passionate about that. There was a question in the Hillsong documentary that I just asked you about before we hopped on. And we're like, no, we gotta save it. Do you have to be a narcissist or have narcissistic traits? Like this uber confidence, this whatever that we sometimes see as a CEO of a company, right? A really successful company. Do you think people have to have that to succeed in a megachurch? Like, is a megachurch inherently flawed? Because I think that's where I'm starting to land, but I want to know what you think.
I think so. My direct answer, and I'm going to just be super specific. We are talking about these mega churches.
Yes,
Not
megachurches,
about little churches or
specifically Hillsong in this example.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
I do think there are tendencies that are already there. I don't know if you have to be a full-blown narcissist. I don't know if I agree with that. I do think that you do have to have, yeah, I think you do have to have some tendencies in order to get it to explode the way mega churches have.
Well, and when you think about it, and I would include like Mars Hill, Mark Driscoll in this.
Yep. Yep.
There is like this, you have to be able to draw people in, right? This is CEO stuff.
Yes.
Where you
Be
you have to be
charismatic.
able to get people bought into your vision, your ministry,
Mhm.
and then you have to not have quite as much empathy
Mhm.
because running a corporation or church, anything is really hard, actually.
Yes.
And so you're going to be more successful if it doesn't cost you interpersonally as much to make these corporate type decisions like layoffs, like whatever the hard
Yeah.
choice is.
Yeah.
I could see a small time pastor having a much harder time making some of these decisions and budgets and all of this stuff than somebody who maybe has a little bit less empathy overall.
Yeah.
And I am sure that there are some megachurch pastors doing this super well. We have clearly not sampled every megachurch pastor. That would be impossible.
Right.
But the formula is secure enough. Like, I've seen this happen so many times.
Yeah.
There's something to it.
Yes.
There's just something to it.
Well, and the system behind it too, right? Is so there's one main pastor,
Yep.
right? So there's one main pastor. And what ends up happening at these mega churches is everyone is focused on that one main pastor for all the answers, for all the guidance.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about tendencies or, traits of narcissism, that waters those seeds that are already there.
Yeah.
So what sucks, and it's no one's like, I'm not saying it's anyone's fault. What sucks is the congregants and staff even, it's like they're on this pedestal now.
Yes.
Because the load isn't shared, really.
Yeah.
So they're walking in already on this pedestal. So there's this pressure, and then we feed it.
And then we feed it.
Right?
Yeah.
So we'll probably get into this. My thought is to fix these issues, to fix all this, is to honestly have numerous pastors.
We got to spread it out.
You have to spread it out. You have to spread out the preaching, the meeting with congregants, right?
Yes.
All of it. And just with how the church has been, it just needs to happen.
It needs to happen. And we have to have feedback loops that go up, not just down.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
That's part of the humility. Nepotism is a problem in every church I've ever attended where family members, and by the way, this happens in companies. This is not unique to church either. But when whole families start being employed by a bigger system, it gets messy really fast. It's just hard. And it's totally understandable. Like I said, it happens in corporations too. I can totally understand why a pastor might want his wife and kids and niece and nephew and whoever else to work in this thriving organization that is aligned in the core values, right, of the family. They're not doing anything wrong. The problem is when we get into secrets and power and money, it gets really tricky. One of the stories from Hillsong that I found especially sad was the woman who had been assaulted by one of the pastors' children. right? Who was working kind of almost tangentially in
Yes.
HR. And so they couldn't report anything because this person was in place and they were related to a pastor. There wasn't a formal HR, like a formal structure to
Yep.
keep people safe. And that
Yeah.
is a lot of times what fuels this too.
Yep. Yeah. I will say that the few churches that I worked for where I had a really positive experience, they had a great HR system.
Mm,
Great, phenomenal HR.
that makes such a difference. And maybe that's a takeaway too, is like maybe you work for a church staff, maybe you have in the past, maybe you're thinking about it. That would
Mm-hmm.
be something I would be looking for is what is the HR structure? We
Mm-hmm.
laugh because we've worked places with full HR, we've worked places with no HR, we've
Mm-hmm.
worked places with software systems like Bambi. Who named it Bambi? I'll never know. But
Yeah.
I mean, we've kind of seen it all, but I think to have a safe work culture, but especially in a church, there have to be some boundaries and some safe spaces for people to talk about,
Their experience.
particularly if abuse is going on,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's super important. So, one of the things that we're kind of plugging as we're talking about this, we're going to get into high control groups, which are cults. Natalie and I want to be really clear that we don't think churches are inherently cults. Neither one of us believe that.
No. Yep.
That is not what we're saying. But when we talk about high control groups, we're going to talk a lot about prevention because we have some thoughts on how you can know if you're getting sucked into one of these and what you could do, or if someone you love is getting sucked into something, how you
Yep.
can be able to be supportive in an effective way.
Yep.
I do think, though, even though I'm not saying churches are high control groups, there can be elements of high control groups in churches. And high control groups is when, I mean, it's basically what it says. There's just a lot of control exerted through various means on a group of people. And it starts to have kind of undue influence in their life. It starts to take over.
Yes.
And if you even volunteer for a church, even just for fun on a Sunday morning, like it starts 2 Sundays a month, and then pretty soon it's 4, and then pretty soon you're also bringing breakfast for the volunteers on Sunday afternoon. Like churches have a way, for better or worse, and sometimes it's really sweet. People are so sweet, right? They want to be with each other and they want to help. But pretty soon you are working for free.
Yeah.
You are working for free. So now the congregants are putting all this money in the pot. The pastor may or may not be making a lot of money. In the few examples I can think of that I know of, particularly when I was much younger and stuff, the pastors were making a ridiculous amount of money. That is not always true.
Correct. Yeah.
A whole bunch of people working for free.
Yeah. Yeah.
Volunteer Hillsong had a whole internship program that was literally set up to keep that thing running without creating overhead financially, which is insane.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's the thing, they were raking in so much money. Again, going back to that Instagram guy who was focused on the sneakers
Yep.
that pastors were wearing, they were raking in so much money. And these interns were barely surviving. They talked about how little they would eat because they just couldn't afford anything.
Oh, and then they talked about how they would look at each other and say, "Can you believe we get to do this?" Almost like a mantra. And when I heard
It
that, I
wasn't
went,
the interns who did that. It was people who've been through the system and
yeah.
got hired would say that stuff to the interns, and then
yeah,
they would just mimic.
they would mimic. That's right. But when you think about that, that is a high control.
Yes.
That's exactly how a high control group works.
Yes. Here's the thing. I have been an intern, and I'm not saying this is bad. I've been an intern I've been in an unpaid internship. That's fine.
We both have. Yeah.
And also give me the time to get a job. Right? So if I'm signing up willingly for an unpaid internship, that's my choice.
Yes.
And also give me time to get a job so I can make money and support myself a little.
And if you love me and care for me like you say you do from the stage. Pay me a livable wage, right?
Yes.
Allow me to work. I mean, it's literally getting into almost, what do they call it? I mean, it's a little bit trafficking like labor. When especially, and there are some other organizations I'm not going to name drop on here because I don't want to catch that much flack, but there are some organizations that literally send people around the world to do this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little frightening at times because if you really peel it all the way back, it really does just start to look like free labor.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're just sending people around for free labor. Well, there's like words for that. And especially if you get in a high control group and you don't feel like you can leave and
Mm-hmm.
all of your friends and your family is all wrapped up in the same organization, it can get pretty scary pretty fast.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, especially when you can't make your own living. You can't, you're not,
Yes.
you can't make your own, you can't pay your own bills. You can't buy food.
Mm-mm.
That's when those are red flags, my friends. Those are red flags.
Red flags, right? Absolutely. So unfortunately for me, one of my red flags is if a church is large. So I'm figuring that out because I know, because I have a brain in my head, that there are big churches out there that are fine. Like I know that. And there are good people in every church.
Yes.
And by the way, these pastors who fall from grace are people
Mm-hmm.
who typically love their families, typically have loved their work,
Mm-hmm.
and they get chewed up and spat out too.
Yeah.
And that's heartbreaking too. I mean, as annoyed as we get with these people, I
Yeah.
can't help but watch Carl Lentz and just feel sad. Or even Brian Houston and all of his gnarly crap that he's in right now.
Yeah.
His father was a pedophile. So when you look at these things, like there's real pain there. Like these are real people with real pain. Their behavior is just obnoxious.
Yes. Well, and what I was going to say about Carl Lentz is, I mean, it always starts from the top and trickles down,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so he was one of the people who worked under Frank Houston. I mean, not directly, he worked under Brian,
Right.
but it all trickled down.
It all
Right.
trickled down.
Sketchy behavior all trickled down. And Carl didn't get the support he probably needed.
Mm-mm.
He didn't have the accountability he needed. He didn't have the oversight he needed.
Mm.
And here's the thing, when we don't have people who are keeping us accountable, it is easy to be the head of a company or an organization and get ahead of ourselves.
Oh, for sure.
Right? I would probably be subject to that.
Oh, I
If
know I would.
have people who would speak into my life truly and say, Natalie, cut your crap, like
Yeah.
bring it down a notch,
You
right?
got a chip on your shoulder, dude.
Yeah, or like you got a bigger head than what you can run with here, like
Absolutely.
and we thank goodness you and I have people in our life, but when we don't have people in our life like that
Yes.
and we take on really big roles and it grows really quick, it's easy to be
Yeah.
in that space. And what's sad about Carl Lentz's story, where, for me in the heart piece of Carl Lentz is he had a huge fall from grace and he made some of those people so much richer and
Oh,
no one was there to support him or catch him or help him. He
no.
had to figure it out from ground zero.
And he was he was really the scapegoat for
He was
so
the
many things.
scapegoat. Yeah.
Now, that being said, I just heard that he's working on getting back into ministry. So then, is his little Netflix special a ministry outreach or is it a hard launch into a new ministry? I guess we'll find out.
Here's my hope. I
Mhm.
hope he turns it into something redemptive.
I hope so too.
I really
hope so
do.
too. And I think to his credit, it does seem like he's a little bit more integrated now. Like just dropping the facade and just kind of
Naming it.
naming the messiness,
Mhm.
I think is a better look on him
Mhm.
than trying to be Mr. Rockstar,
Mhm. Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
So now one of the heart pieces, and I think really where we wanted to kind of wrap it up tonight is, where is church heading now? So if I'm trying to find a healthy church now, what do I look for? What does that even look like?
That's such a good question. So when my husband and I were searching for a new church, I remember when we walked into the church we're attending now, we automatically felt a sense of peace. So I know that sounds really hokey. We felt a sense of peace because we walked into the lobby and it was just regular people, regular humans.
Yeah.
Wasn't a fashion contest. It wasn't like humongous.
Mm-mm.
And so automatically we already felt a sense of peace. What really helped me was we got to know the pastor. My husband already kind of knew the pastor a little bit because he had gone to school with his kids
Yeah.
in high school. So he kind of already knew, but I got to know the pastor. I got to know the pastor's wife. Pastor's wife wanted to have coffee with me automatically. And we got integrated so quickly from that level, not just like, hey, join a small group and get integrated. That was also encouraged because community is important.
Yeah.
But I could reach out to the pastor, the pastor's wife, and it wouldn't feel weird at all.
They're accessible.
They're accessible. We are very connected in general with people within the community, but with them. And so I think when I think of trying to get involved with a church, check that out. Can you have a conversation with the pastor?
One of
Right?
my rules too is I love to see a little bit of gray hair in a church. So
Yes.
if everybody looks exactly like me, I get pretty uncomfortable.
Yes.
If there aren't people with a lot of ministry experience, I get a little bit uncomfortable. That doesn't mean the pastor has to be way older than me, but
we need generations.
we need generations.
And that's our church has generations. I mean, we are connected with individuals who are in their 60s, 70s. And I was involved with their youth group. I'm involved with the teen version of CR, and it's just awesome. And even with that, people I volunteer with are all different ages, from college to 50s.
I've seen you so happy where you are, which is so cool. Knowing that we come from we have some similar things in our background. So it gives me a lot of hope, and it's very exciting to see you plugged into somewhere that you really love and feel so comfortable. I do believe it's possible.
It is, I promise.
But if you're out there and you're just struggling, you may not be a Christian. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
We're not here to proselytize you or do anything about that. But if you're feeling discouraged, I hope this is encouraging. That actually you can keep an eye on some of this stuff and maybe determine some of this for yourselves.
Yeah.
I think church is going to look way different in the next 10 years. I really do.
Too.
I think we're going to see a lot of smaller churches, and we're going to see a lot of empty big buildings.
Yeah. Yeah. The other heart piece of it for me is, again, going back to the grace that these individuals who are, the main pastors of these mega churches are also human beings.
Very much so. With families sometimes and children.
Families, yes. And there's so many layers to the pain that happens when these individuals fall from grace. And, my biggest encouragement is, instead of throwing stones, just keep that in mind.
Absolutely.
It's okay to be angry. I've been angry. I've been so angry before.
Oh, same.
And I have to remember that there's other people involved, and I have to be mindful of that.
And I have so I can have an opinion about what somebody's doing in a position of leadership. But also they didn't ask for my opinion. So part of it is
one person did one time.
Well, and he got it. But I do think it's really important for us to be brave in our feedback sometimes, but also to be mindful and gracious, just like we would want somebody to be with us. I think that's important because we're all people.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to be honest, Janine. I am sweating talking about
this was a doozy. This was very stressful actually for us to do, but we feel it so deeply. We've talked about this since before we even started the podcast. Like we wanted to talk about this. We're going to get into some high control groups soon. We have a couple really interesting episodes coming up that we've been preparing for you guys. So stay tuned. We will see you next week. And
thank you, our forensic friends.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm Janine.
And I'm Nat.
And as always, thanks for listening and join us next week for more crime, psychology, and heart.